A very warm good day to all of you from Geneva. I, along with Charlotte Griffiths, I'm Hari Tulsidas, along with Charlotte Griffiths, would like to welcome you all to this fourth session of the UNECE Resource Management Week 2021. This session is being recorded. The session will also have simultaneous interpretation into English, French, and Russian. Please select your channel from the bottom menu. Participants are encouraged to give your comments, ask questions through the chat box. We will try to answer as many questions as we have time with us. If any participant wants to make a comment verbally, please raise your hand. Depending on the time available, the moderator and the chair will decide whether to take that question. You can also provide your comments via email to reserves.energy@un.org. We will post the email also in the chat box. All presentations and recording will be uploaded to the website later. I will now hand over to the chair of this session, David McDonald, who is also the chair of EGRM, to take this session forward. Over to you, Dave.
Thank you very much, Harry. I think we have a very exciting afternoon with a series of different topics to be covered. We've got a truly distinguished panel of speakers to discuss various aspects of UNFC development and implementation. But before I start, I would like to make one addition to an oversight on our part, is that early yesterday morning we had a moment to remember a number of EGRM members who sadly had passed away during the past year, and we overlooked to include one of our great friends and colleagues, Dr. Ferdi Kamasani, who sadly passed away in November of 2020. Ferdi, as you can see on the screen there, is one of the founding members of the original ad hoc group of experts and was long-standing member of the Bureau. He was truly integral in coming up with the development of the mineral commodities portions of the UNFC. He was a great friend to both the EGRM and the UNFC. He had a long and very fruitful career, starting off from his birthplace in Italy to go to university in France, where he studied with some of the founders of geostatistics within the minerals community. He had a great career with companies including De Beers, Anglo American, and the Atomic Energy Corporation, amongst others. And he was a fundamental part of the creation of the Crisco template and work there. So he's a true loss to the resources community, to the mining community, and to all of those of us within the EGRM who knew him. So please take a moment to remember Ferdi and the good times that we had with all of them. He was always good for a laugh and a good conversation at a break. So he will be missed very, very much. So this afternoon, European time here, we're very honored to have Her Excellency Tatiana Clouthier, who is the Minister of Economy of Mexico, joining us. The Minister will open the session with an overview of the application of UNFC to minerals in Mexico. We've had a number of presentations on some of this work in past years, but so it'll be very exciting to get the minister's perceptions on how that work is impacting the future plans for implementation of activities within Mexico. Also this morning, we have a number of other distinguished speakers who will speak on various aspects of resource management. We'll follow that with a discussion on some of the new UNFC specifications that have been developed over the last few months. We have four new bits of classification, bridging documents, and actual framework specifications for petroleum, minerals, nuclear projects, and groundwater. And we'll be discussing each of those issues going forward this afternoon. All of the people and experts who worked on that spent many hours burning the midnight oil. Well, that seems to promote just one commodity. There were lots of energy in place there to drive them through the development of these specifications. So we'll hear about the work they've done there, and included, of course, will be some of the final guidelines to accommodate social and environmental considerations will also be presented. And then we'll finish up with a session on the roundtable events on extractive industries that have been part of the United Nations initiative over the past year. The Deputy Secretary General of the UN and the Secretary General's Special Envoy on Financing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development kicked off a series and organized a series of roundtables by each of the regional commissions, including the UNECE. And building on the outputs of these regional events, there will be a global roundtable on extractive industries organized by the Secretary General on the 10th of May. And we'll hear about this from a representative from the Executive Office of the Secretary General in the UN in New York. So with that, I'd like to pass over first to Her Excellency Tatiana Cloutier, who is the Minister of Economy of Mexico, who will speak, as I said, on the pilot project for the classification of Mexico's mining projects based on the UNRMS and UNFC. So Your Excellency, may I pass to you, please?
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here, and I really want to thank Ulises Neri for doing this connection with all of you, with UNECE. We are very happy that we are going to be able to work in this research on objective number 17, Sustainable Development Goals of the Sustainable Development Goals. When we're talking about getting together and finding solutions all together for the 2030 agenda. Therefore, if somebody can help me with the next slide, please. We're looking, let me just tell you a little bit what's happening in Mexico mining industry. First of all, we have had for the long run, there is like, we have a lot of problems in some areas where that community does not assume or does not think that mining projects are really helping them. And there are other ones that have worked very well together as to finding solutions and to have an improvement in the area. Therefore, we believe that this project is going to help us change, especially the paradigm of resource management in Mexico, and change all these something that people believes that mining is not, or it's an old way of doing the mining. It is not something that really helps the community or can help development. We're going to be working on the requirements of sustainable development as primary dependent, the optional and responsible use of natural resources. As I said before, we have a great opportunity nowadays, especially with all the changes that are happening in the vehicle industry for zero emissions. And we believe that doing a sustainable mining process, we can do a lot in the battery industry and provide a lot of useful minerals if we work together with the community. We believe that we have the inclusive development of the industry and long-term policies for resilience, and obviously alignment to sustainable development goals. If we are able to achieve, improve, and show the community that this is something that can be done, I believe that we're going to have a lot of support and we're going to have very good results. For the next one, something that it is important as to have in, can we change the slide, please? Okay, as you may know, Mexico is a country with a mining history that still weighs a lot among the world's largest metal producer. The country is the world's first place in silver production. We have also a very good and important production in copper, gold, and zinc. And the mining metallurgical sector in Mexico contributes to 2.4% of the national gross domestic product. And the country's geological potential is still growing and attracting national and foreign companies. I can tell you on this one that with all the new process of, and I'm going back again to the battery sector, there is a lot of potential in many minerals that are assumed to be in our country and that are going to be exploited. On January 2020, it generated 381,000 direct jobs and generated more than 2.3 million of indirect jobs, which shows the great capacity and the great impact that the mining industry has in Mexico. So it is very important, this work that we're going to be doing together and the help that we're going to be getting from UNECE. Next one. As I said before, we have 8 of the objectives of the Agenda 2030, and it is very important that we put an emphasis on those ones. So the work, it is based on how people can look and change the way they have been looking to mining before. One of the objectives is poverty. The other one is number 5, gender equity. The other one is clean water. Number 8, decent work and economical growth, which I associated with the battery sector and analysis, water innovation and production and responsible consumption. So that we have a lot of objectives that can be put together, and this research is going to help us a lot. Therefore, we have selected 3 projects in Mexico, and we have chosen on these 3 projects. I'm going to tell you about a little bit about what I'm looking for to do in each project, so they can show us to the rest of the mining processes or the mining areas what can be done. First of all, we are trying to choose one where we have original groups or indigenous groups, the other one on a natural protected area, and the other one I'm really pointing out, it's in Querétaro, it's called San Jose. We have other kind of problems that we would like you to put special attention on that one. So we selected the 3 projects. We are looking for applying and test the UNRMS based on the UNFC process, mapping the mining industry in Mexico to the Sustainable Development Goals, as I said before, and this collaboration with you that we really appreciate it. The platform, it is to make decisions in the mining and or regulatory policy. We believe that all the results that you're going to be giving us will help us point out a better, to make better decisions in all the regulatory policy that we have. For doing that, I can tell you that we have done already some tables and dialogues with the stakeholders, with the government, with the companies, and with financial institutions in an informal way. We believe that this process is going to help us even go deeper and be a more sustainable process. And we're going to set a base to share our experience in Latin America and also in the International Center of Excellence. We have done already a gathering together with Bolivia, where we're talking about the mining process that they have had, and we're looking to one of the extraction products that we have in Mexico that we could have. So we're looking already to them. So we believe that this will help us even more. Next one. Well, that's actually what we have at this moment. And I don't know if you have any questions, so that's what we have on the table at this moment. And we really want to thank, again, UNECE for opening the door to us and to work on this project, and especially Dr. Ulises Neri for doing the getting together with Mexico and your organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. A really thought-provoking talk. And I think some of the comments you made on one of the earlier slides about the importance of education and bringing people along who may think that mining, just because of the fact that it does leave, it can have a bad reputation, that it's something that shouldn't be carried out with at the scope that's going to be needed to be able to meet our future processes of meeting the Agenda 2030 goals. And that's something that we're addressing very much right now within the EGRM, to try and develop tools that can help to present that information in meaningful ways where people can start to understand the value that these activities will bring. Do we have any other questions for Your Excellency?
If you allowed me, just...
Oh, yes, please, go ahead.
Okay, just for what you're saying, I really want to stress on that. We do really need to change the perception of the people, because in general, it is something that has been looked like. I think we have, in some areas especially, there is like an old view of that mining does not go hand by hand, or cannot go, that would be the word, cannot go hand by hand with the 2030 agenda. And I think that's one of the greatest challenges that we're going to have to be facing, and that where you can support us a lot.
Yeah, because actually we're not going to achieve the 2030 agenda without appropriate mining of the materials that are absolutely necessary to achieve that.
Sure, surely.
Yeah. We've had a question here. If you might share a few words on how you feel that gender issues are being addressed and will be addressed in the future in Mexico.
Okay. One of the things that we find in where the mines have been set, obviously it is mainly in areas that are not part of the big concentrations where people live, but it's like rural areas. And in those places, mostly the women are the ones that face, or are the ones that are there. They are little by little being invited to participate in the mining processes. That's something that has changed, but it has changed very slowly. So I believe they are the ones that are left. Nonetheless, on the other hand, they are invited to work in the mining camps, doing traditional works. And I believe that we have to, in a way, change that a little bit, and they can be provided and educated in other areas too. So that those are the ones, I mean, the challenges that I believe we have in front of us as to be facing in those areas. Mm-hmm.
Very good, very good. Thank you very much. Any other comments? I don't see any now, but thank you so very much. And just to reiterate a comment I made earlier, is we really appreciate the dedication and time that Mexico is putting into applying the UNFC and working with us in developing the United Nations resource management system. Having practical and effective pilot studies like this is absolutely essential for us to be able to continue the expansion of it. And we certainly hope that with the development of an international center of excellence in Latin America, that Mexico will play a huge part of in helping us to develop and expand the activities of our group. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll pass on now to Mark Burnett, who's a principal geologist at AMC Consulting in the UK, who will give a discussion on taking the green raw materials for the economic transition. So Mark, if I can pass to you, please.
Sure. Thanks, David. Thanks all. So we've talked at length in previous discussions, and it's going to be later on in other sessions, where is this material going to come from? How is it going to be managed? And what are the implications for society at large? Now, it's of interest that just scanning there. It's of interest that the World Bank has been doing some parallel work to UNFC 2030 goals, where they've been looking at what's going to happen by 2050. And as you can see here, to get to a carbon neutral environment, there's going to have to be mass amounts of raw materials mined.
Mark, your presentation is not showing up.
Sorry, Harry. Let me try again. Okay. For some reason, it doesn't want to share the screen. Harry, would it be possible then for you to run it from your side, if you don't mind? Okay, could we go to slide 2, please? There we go. So as I was saying, the World Bank has been doing some parallel work, and they've established that to get to a carbon neutral environment by the year 2050, which is effectively when the projection of the world's population will reach 9 billion people, we're going to have to mine significant amounts of green metals, so graphite, lithium, and cobalt. Next slide, please. Though that being said, we still need to remember that the skeleton metals and minerals that drive the economy, such as aluminium and copper, will also need to be produced. And unfortunately, even with the circular economy and reprocessing and recycling all of these metals, we are still not going to have sufficient quantities to allow people to develop to the levels of economic growth that they would like to. Next slide, please. But probably what is more interesting is that when you start analyzing this report and additional materials that I went through, is that a lot of this consumption doesn't take into account that we still need to support current infrastructure, and we're going to have to replace the current infrastructure with new infrastructure, which will include things like new transmission lines and all the infrastructure which will have to come with it, and primary component parts of the new vehicles that we're going to need for a carbon neutral environment. Next slide, please. So what does that mean to large economies? Well, in the case of America, the EU, India, countries have woken up to the fact that metals and minerals are going to be in short supply. So what they started to do is create these criticality metals and minerals lists. Now, this concept isn't particularly new. It started off really back after the First World War, when America realized that they didn't have sufficient metals for the war manufacturing capacity. This later exacerbated after the Second World War and the creation of what was referred to in America as the Paley Commission, looking at where America was going to source its raw metals and materials. Interesting, when you look at this diagram, the metals and minerals which are just slightly below the red line, for example, tin, molybdenum, manganese, and chrome, are all produced in countries which may or may not be politically stable going forwards into the future. And Europe, as well as other countries, need to find sources of these commodities to run their economies in a manner which they would allow them to continue to be successful in the market. Now, you can see on your right-hand side just a reminder of what some of these commodities are and what they are actually used for in our modern society. So just looking at any of those, if we don't have them, our modern society, as we know, is not going to survive. Next slide, please. So what has happened from a geopolitical point of view is different countries have started to align themselves. The most recent one is the Critical Metals Mapping Initiative, where America, Australia, and Canada have united together, where they're going to be exchanging geological and mineral information so that at least they can try and keep the economies attractive and producing. Now, what is of interest in this relationship is Australia and Canada are both primary exporters of raw materials and minerals, while America is a net consumer of raw materials and metals. In fact, if you look at the current American critical supply list, they are totally dependent on 14 critical elements which they cannot produce by themselves, and they need those to allow both the economy as well as the military machine to continue functioning in the manner that they used to. Next slide, please. In a similar manner, Europe has done this with the European Raw Minerals Alliance, where again, identifying those raw materials and where they're located in the greater EU is becoming a critical component of Europe and recently the United Kingdom's continuous drive in terms of running a successful economy and where they can be sustainable in and of themselves. Now, one of the things you may notice if you regard the previous slide is that these things do come with different definitions of what is critical and in terms of the definition of a resource and a reserve. Next slide, please. Now, what we have found over time, unfortunately, is the net amount of discoveries are dropping off and dropping off quite rapidly. Part of this is maybe due to the fact that a lot of companies are taking themselves off international stock exchange, where they're regulated in terms of things like the CRISCO codes and environmental regulations. So we're not seeing that, but also it may just be a case of we've found all the easy stuff. And this is a major concern, obviously, for scientists going forward. Next slide, please. But also what we can see is countries which are normally considered as being areas where there's a lot of money spent into exploration, such as Australia and Canada, even those countries which have massive government supported programs are not seeing the continued rate of recoveries and discoveries as what they used to, implying that we're going to have to find new sources of minerals, or at least start tackling our critical minerals in a very, very different manner to what we've been doing them in the past with the straight linear economy, and not recycling, or at least not recycling to the levels that we probably should be. Next slide, please, Harry. Obviously, one way of doing this is to try and make our current mines and operations more efficient. And this is where we start getting into the realms of big data. So one way that, for example, you can monetize this information is by using information gathered over time to effectively control and maximize the returns in your operation by doing things, for example, cutting your economic cutoff grades, or being able to process and process other elements out of your standard process flows, which you wouldn't have considered in the past and would get dumped in waste dumps, which again is something that the UN has been looking at in considerable detail, as have a number of other agencies, being able to go back and recycle these stockpiles, both from an environmental point of view, but also from a purely economic point of view. Next slide, please. But the other things we can start looking at with big data is not only to try and relook at old areas where we've mined in the past, but is looking at the entire economy and the minerals environment as a system where one thing impacts into another. This is some research done by Dr. Glenn Nwalia from the University of the Witwatersrand in South Africa, where he's trying to demonstrate that we shouldn't be, again, looking at things in a straight linear order, that we should start redefining and reconceptualizing things in circular, or at least systematic and systems thinking. Next slide, please, Harry. So getting on to this, we often think in terms of the metals and minerals we're going to mine, but where we're going to accommodate people. Now, as you can see from here, we're looking at silly things like tons and tons of sand and tons of cement that we're going to use. And some of the things we take for granted, like cement, is based on things which are already coming from carbon-rich environments. Next slide, please, Harry. So one of the things which has been pointed out in Germany at the moment, as we start moving into green technology and green energy and closing of coal-fired power stations, you're no longer going to have ready supplies of fly ash, which for certain types of Portland cement is pretty critical. And currently we don't have valid supplies of alternatives to match what we've been doing in the past in terms of cement. Replacing fly ash with plastic, for example, hasn't got the same tensile stress, and there's obviously issues with that in terms of going forwards, reliability of infrastructure, and just something as simple as insurance. Insurers will not start wanting to insure something where there's not viable proven technologies in the past. Next slide, please, Harry. So taking that and leading on from what the minister's words, we need to start looking at redefining the attitude or the perception that mining and the extractive industry has. If you look at the last comment, this is coming from the EU with the right to say no to mining. So we're now sitting in the situation where we would want a low carbon environment, but there's still the pushback from civil society saying, yes, we want it, but at the same time, we don't want mining that goes with it. And this is a conundrum which is probably going to continue for a while to come. And there's probably going to have to be ongoing discussions with civil society in terms of what do we need to do and how we're going to confront these problems. Thank you. That should be 10 minutes if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you very much, Mark. It was a really good, clear presentation, again, on the importance of recognizing the need to get these raw materials to be able to meet the requirements of Agenda 2030. Do we have any quick questions for Mark, perhaps?
The minister has a comment, Dave.
Okay.
Yes, I think you raised one of the main questions, and that's what we're facing over there again in Mexico. And I think it is something, how are we going to be managing and how are we going to be convincing, showing hard data to civil society as to make a combination of how mining can work with the sustainable development objectives. So I think that's the best challenges that we have. And how do you see that? And how do you look yourself addressing this issue?
Mark, do you have a comment to that?
Sorry, Minister. I think it really just boils down to education. Being a geologist myself, I think geologists and mining industries and people involved in this, we understand the implications, but I don't necessarily think we're always that good in communicating the implications of what we're trying to achieve to society at large. And unfortunately, mining for the vast majority of its history has been associated, to steal a better poet than myself, dark satanic mills. That people see the downside of mining, but they don't necessarily see the upside of mining and how critical mining is. And possibly just to add on to that, the intrinsic part that the petroleum industry plays in our society, as soon as you start investigating what the oil and gas industry actually does, and it's not just petrol and cars and diesel, it is almost every single aspect of our life is touched by the petroleum industry. I think a lot of education still needs to be done, that they're not evil, they're a fact of life. We just need to be able to manage them in a lot more responsible manner.
Yeah. Very, very good. Yeah, thank you very much for that, Mark. There are a number of other questions that are coming in through the chat there, and what we can do is try and answer those in the chat themselves. And certainly after the sessions, we will collate all of these comments, and where there are questions and we can get a response to them, we will certainly go through to make those complete. So thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate your presentation again. We'll now pass over to Alistair Jones, who is the chair of the Technical Advisory Group, to give a report of the activities of the Technical Advisory Group over the past year. So Alistair, if we can pass to you, please.
Thanks, Dave. Just sharing my screen. Do you see my presentation okay?
Yep, that looks fine.
Great. So hello, everybody. Very good to be here, or at least to be with you in virtual presence. What I want to do is to report on the TAG progress over the last 7 months. So I'm going to briefly summarize the organization and scope of the TAG. That's just really a reminder. Then I'm going to give an overview of the TAG and associated working group achievements, and most of that work is done within the working groups, and those are since EGRM 11, which, as you remember, was last September. So this is only over 7 months, and I think you'll be quite surprised at how much has been achieved. I want to summarize the recommendations of a task force on the UNFC update that was put together and worked during that time. And I want to explain to you the current status of UNFC. So just as a reminder of the Bureau structure, the TAG consists of the chairs of all the sectorial working groups. And its purpose is to coordinate the working groups and to review and validate documents. Now that's important because we're developing standards, so it's important to have consistency and clarity in those documents. Here's a list of the members of the TAG. At EGRM 11, I told you that David Elliott was sadly about to step down from the Social and Environmental Working Group, which he did. Very pleased that Claudio Virues and Jim Jennings took over the chairing of that working group jointly. And they agreed that for sort of clarity and simplicity, Claudio would represent the working group on the TAG. And I just want to thank all the TAG members on behalf of EGRM for their dedicated leadership of the working groups. It's a lot of work, and I think they've done a fantastic job and continue to do a fantastic job. So a lot has been achieved since last September. This is just an overview. You have already heard already something of the work for instance, in the renewables session, that really good session yesterday, and you'll hear more this afternoon and in the rest of the week. The items in blue are done, and those in green are in progress. So there are 4 new draft specifications completed, which you'll hear about next. Updates are in progress for 2 other specifications and for several key bridging documents. So those follow on the update of UNFC from the 2009 to 2019 version to be consistent with that. And important guidance and application documents have been produced. The Women in Resource Management Working Group has made really great progress. And EGRM, with a lot of input from the working groups, gave feedback to 3 important global sustainability initiatives. And that feedback included highlighting the potential role of UNFC in these initiatives. And then the working groups led a series of very well attended and really valuable webinars and workshops. So I just want to move on now to tell you a bit about the task force on UNFC specifications. This is a short summary. There's a full report on the meeting website. The review was initiated to, well, the work was initiated to review the current resource specifications in the light of 2019, and that specifications had been developed over a number of years. The membership was from across the working group. We had 13 members, so very good representation, and there was consultation back to the working groups. And we made recommendations on updating for consistency with UNFC 2019, because most of those specifications had been written to link in with UNFC 2009 for consistency and clarity and ease of use as well, and also recommendations on a common glossary. So what we proposed was an incremental approach. We currently have what we're calling version 1, and we should move incrementally to consistency with 2019 and limited harmonization. That's version 2, and that needs to happen soon. And then there is the potential for more significant revision and further harmonization in the longer term. So just to expand a little bit on that, the recommended harmonization is immediate updates of resource specifications so as to be consistent with UNFC 2019. That update from 2009 to 2019 was basically one of terminology. So it's largely a matter of updating the terminology. Also, we saw the opportunity to develop a common glossary, which will be a bit broader than what is currently in the back of the UNFC 2019 specifications, and also take the opportunity, as far as is practical, for limited harmonization in scope and contents and structure, and in the definitions of the categories, just to make things easier to use, to make it easier to look across the different specifications. And we also recommended considering a more significant revision in the longer term. I'll say a bit more about that. So I just want to say a little bit about benefits and limitations of these 2 updates. So version 2 will be a light touch update to focus on consistency with the UNFC 2019 and limited harmonization. So it should be quite easy to achieve and won't be disruptive to current users. The categorization and classification will remain the same as they did when we moved from 2009 to 2019 as the parent document. So that's kind of short to medium term. The longer term is version 3, and there are potential for 2 types of change that we might consider. The first is further harmonization and simplification, aimed at making UNFC across all the resources easier to use. For instance, making comparison of different projects clearer. And the cost of that is, yes, it will take a bit more work to achieve it, but again, it's not going to be disruptive to users. The second type of change is the potential for a more substantive update. Now, we have talked over the last few years about a substantive update, and that does have drawbacks in that it may be a bit disruptive for users. So we need to decide take a considered decision on this. But there are several changes that may be very, very beneficial. And one in particular that I want to highlight is the possibility of expanding UNFC to describe not only project status and quantities to be produced, and that's essentially what it does now, thinking about the social, environmental, and economic aspects and the technical aspects of a project maturity, and the quantities to be produced and uncertainties in those, but also to provide more project information that would support sustainable resource management. In other words, an information framework, and that would be scalable. It would be project-based, but it could apply, as UNFC does, to groups of projects and upwards. So the sort of information that one might consider is environmental, social, and economic footprint, the barriers to project progression. So what would it take to progress a project towards maturity, the key risks, and how all these project measures would change over time. And that sort of change could be a tremendous support to those making decisions about projects and within a sustainability agenda. So the task force recommended the next steps, and they are to develop a common glossary. So a first draft of that glossary was provided in the report, and I'm pleased to say that development is progressing, and that will be shared across all the groups before finalizing, and hopefully will get finalized later this year. The next thing that's begun is the piloting of version 2 updates. Remember, those are about consistency with UNFC terminology and taking the opportunity to see what harmonization, limited harmonization is practical. And those are in progress for both anthropogenic and geothermal specifications. And again, hopefully they will be completed this year. So the other thing that we recommended was further definition of version 3, which, if you remember, is about further harmonization and potentially substantive updates. That was postponed because it was awaiting development of the EGRM vision, which you heard about yesterday, and also clarification of UNRMS requirements. So this can potentially begin following EGRM 12, the work on the kind of what we're going to do beyond version 2. So I want to finish by just summarizing the current status of UNFC. We're in a great position, I think. We have specifications or draft specifications for almost every resource type that we've considered. And that's happened, at quite an accelerated pace, beginning in 2016, I think, and with 4 new specifications in draft this year. And I think that's a fantastic achievement, including now groundwater, minerals, nuclear, and petroleum. Work on hydromarine, which is the other remaining resource that we've talked about has been initiated as well. So we made the update of UNFC in 2019 from 2009 to have more universal terminology. And the new draft specifications that I've just mentioned, they're designed to be consistent with UNFC 2019. And we are in the process of updating the existing specifications as well. So in addition, draft bridging documents updated to 2019 have been developed or initiated, so that those are for Crisco, the two Chinese bridging documents, the minerals and petroleum, they have been drafted, and we're in the review process for both the Crisco and the two Chinese bridging documents. And then the work on the updating the bridging to PRMS, that's the petroleum resource management system, that has been initiated as well. And then in addition to all this, important guidance documents are in place, consistent with 2019, and the working groups are working hard at application and communication. So for instance, the session you heard about yesterday on renewables and the application of UNFC for renewables, and the various webinars that have been held. So thank you very much. There will be a slightly longer version of this talk on the meeting website, and as I mentioned, the full report from the task force on the UNFC update is also on the website. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you very much, Alistair. A good and very thorough talk on the progress that the TAG has made. And again, thank you very much for your leadership there, and also for very much for the work that all the TAG members have done, as this has been a very busy year for all of you. As you said, a great amount of work has been done. There was repeated commentary during your talk on the chat room of the importance of making sure that we continue to get more communication out about this work, and better training to get this out. And I think everything is fitting in with the vision statements that we discussed yesterday, which was about addressing our stakeholders' needs of understanding how we're moving forward. So thank you very much for that. And hopefully we'll have some time at the end today to come back to some of these other questions we might have had for you. Thank you very much, Alistair. We're going to turn over now to some discussions on the UNFC specifications that have been built, that Alistair was just talking about. And so we have five short talks addressing each of these: mineral specifications, petroleum, nuclear fuels, then a little bit deeper dive into nuclear fuel resources and how we can maximize their social and economic benefits. And then groundwater specifications. We have 5 speakers on these, and I'm afraid I'm gonna have to be quite rigorous to give you only 10 minutes per speaker, and I'm gonna have to be a bit ruthless in jumping in. So if you wouldn't mind trying to keep on time, that'd be great. You can all have your full 10 minutes to do that, however. Our first presentation will be on mineral specifications, and we've got Johan Gotzes, who is the chair of the Minerals Working Group. So Johan, if I can pass to you, please.
Thanks for the introduction. I have got the honor to present the specification for mineral projects in here. Next slide, please. First, I would like to thank the members of the Mineral Working Group. It's quite a numerous group. I would like to highlight Michael Neumann and Bianca Neumann as co-authors, and who did a large chunk of work in here, and thanks a lot to all of the group. Next slide, please. What are we doing in here? So we are speaking about mineral projects. In general, the raw materials create the first link of any economic value-added chain. When we do this classification to UNFC or later to UNRMS, we put a mineral project into a classification, or this here as a classification matrix, and there it is the whole target is twofold. The first thing is we've got an access to markets. The second is we've got an information basis for policymakers. Next slide, please. So, what is the essence of the whole classification? It's a matrix with 3 axes. It's a tool to assess the availability of mineral projects in a standardized way under defined conditions. That's that's important. Variable conditions in time are considered through reconciliation. An international usability is maintained through a robust numerical code system. So we do not have any bias by languages, translation, and so on. And in general, our specifications provide a guideline to apply these 3 axes of the rating matrix to mineral projects. Next slide, please. We see the single axis, the social, environmental, economic viability comprises of